Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. In this video, I will explain you about folklore poem. Indonesia is a large nation with a vast territory. As a big nation, of course, Indonesia has diverse culture treasures in each region. One form of Indonesia literature that was created in the past was folk poetry. Folk poetry is the nation heritage in the form of poetry. Poetry, rhymes, and gurindam, which have moral, religious, and ethical value. Old poetry was usually based on by word of mouth and usually that the author or author was not known. Old poetry looks rigid because of rules such as the number of words is each line, the number of lines is each stanza, and also the repetition of word which can be at beginning or at the of a poem, what is known as rhyme, by always instilling a form of critical thinking about the difference that exists. We also indirectly always instill an attitude of mutual respect between cultures that exist Indonesia. Gurindam or rhymes sometimes contain social criticism within the end hopes that someone who has heard and read social criticism from rhymes and gurindam can change his attitude and behavior. Humility in accepting social criticism is a reflection of attitude and mutual respect. Okay, first pantun is a type of old poetry with rhymes and is bound. Syair is an old poem that tells a long story. Gurindam is similar to rhymes and poetry that were once brought by Hindu writers. If we look closely at the pantun, syair, and gurindam, there are all types of poetry. Pantun is not just a composition of words that contains rhyme and rhythm, but also has a series of beautiful words to describe warm moods such as love, affection, and longing for the speaker's revenge. In addition, the pantun also contains creative and critical and intense meaning. Pantun has certain characteristics as follows. First, each stanza consists of 4 lines. Second, each line consists of 8 to 12 syllables. 3 the end rhymes of each line is A, B, A, B. And the next is the first and second lines are samples. The third and fourth line are contents. Okay, step to make pantun. First, you must understanding the characteristic of pantun. The first thing that needs to be done is understand the structure and rules of making pantun. Second, determine the time. The next step is to determine the desired time. And the third, write content for determine sampling poetry is a story that contains might, high story, or religious teachings. However, during its development in Southeast Asia, poetry underwent change so that poetry became distinctly Malay. Poetry has 4 characteristics, namely the first, each stanza consists of 4 lines. Each line usually has 8 until 14 syllables. The rhyme is a, and the language is figurative. And the 4 is online is content. The types of poetry, first is romantic poem. This is the first type of poetry that many readers enjoy. The content are about romance, which is generally found in consolation stories, hikayat, or even in folklore. Second is Panji poetry. Panji type poetry is soulless poetry that usually contains stories of adventure and war. Even in the banner poem, there is also a love story. And the third, historical poetry. This type of Putri based on historical event. When you read of it, most of it about war. And the Putri is allegory. This poem is also animal and flower putri. The content of this poem is a satire on an event. The first is religious poetry. The types of religious poetry is the most important poetry, whereas the poem is divided into four in the form of Sufi poetry, poetry about Islamic history, poetry of advice, poetry of the story of prophet, and how to conclude a message in poetry. The first is you must read the whole of poem. The second, observe and translate sentence. The third is combine the meaning of sentence to sentence, and finally conclude the poem with a good message. The next is Gurindam. Gurindam is also the types of poetry, have rhyme and prophets. Gurindam feature first consists of two lines. The rhyme is AA, relating the teaching of ethics and advice. The first line is condition. The second line is the result. Steps to conclude the contents of Gurindam. You must read the contents of Gurindam carefully and then pay attention to word in each line and make sense of the words contained in each array. By interpreting the words, the content of Gurindam will be easily analyzed and conclude. Pantun, syair, and gurindam are variations of old poetry and Indonesian literary works. Nevertheless, there are some difference between pantun, syair, and gurindam. Pantun is not just a composition of words that contain rhyme and rhythm, but also has a series of beautiful words to describe warm moods such as love, affection, and longing for the speaker's revenge. In addition, the pantun also contains two creative and critical ideas is dense in meaning, while syair is a story that contains myth, history, or religious teaching. However, during the development in Southeast Asia, poetry underwent change, so the poetry became distinctly Malay. Meanwhile, Gurindam is a poem consisting of two lines and contains advice or tips. There are 6 steps that can be taken to paraphrasing. The first, read the whole text. The second, determine the main idea of discourse. The third is determine the story that will be the variation. The fourth, arranging main idea without changing the meaning. And next is refine the main idea. Next, inform the discourse as you wish. Okay, thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.